When Travis Kelce was walking incognito through the park with Taylor Swift, and they approached a 9-year-old child sitting alone on a bench, the child's reaction was nothing like what they expected, but his reason for running away from home would bring Taylor to tears. It was Thursday evening, January 1st, 2026, and Taylor Swift was feeling the particular kind of restlessness that comes after days of being cooped up during the holidays. She and Travis had been enjoying family time and recovery from New Year's Eve celebrations, but both of them were starting to crave some fresh air and the simple pleasure of a normal walk. "You know what I miss," Taylor said, looking out the window at the late afternoon light filtering through the bare trees. "Just being able to take a regular walk without having to plan it like a military operation." Travis, who was scrolling through his phone on the couch, looked over at her with understanding. "Want to try the baseball cap approach? See if we can blend in enough to just be normal people for a while. Do you think it would work?" Taylor asked hopefully. "I mean, if we dress down and keep our heads down, maybe we could walk through Loose Park without anyone recognizing us." "Only one way to find out," Travis replied, setting down his phone. "Worst case, we get recognized and head home. Best case, we get to feel like regular people for an hour." The preparation for their anonymous adventure took on an almost theatrical quality. Taylor spent several minutes in front of her closet, selecting the most unremarkable clothes she owned, items she bought for grocery runs or lazy Sundays that had never seen paparazzi cameras. She chose a plain gray winter coat that she'd purchased at Target during a rare solo shopping trip, dark jeans that had no designer labels, and boots that were practical rather than fashionable. "This feels weird," she admitted to Travis, as she pulled her hair back into the most basic ponytail possible. "I haven't tried to look this ordinary in years." Travis was having his own transformation challenges, trying to find clothes that would make his 6 feet 5 inches frame less noticeable. "The problem with being this tall is that even when I dress down, I still look like a basketball player or a football player," he said, adjusting a Kansas City Royals cap that he hoped would help him blend in with the local sports fans who frequented the area. "At least, your height is the only giveaway," Taylor replied, putting on oversized sunglasses that completely changed the shape of her face. "I feel like my face has been on too many magazine covers for this to really work." But as they made their way out of their neighborhood and toward Loose Park, both of them began to feel the thrill of anonymity. "See if we can blend in enough to just be normal people for a while. Do you think it would work?" Taylor asked hopefully. "I mean, if we dress down and keep our heads down, maybe we could walk through Loose Park without anyone recognizing us." "Only one way to find out," Travis replied, setting down his phone. "Worst case, we get recognized and head home. Best case, we get to feel like regular people for an hour." The preparation for their anonymous adventure took on an almost theatrical quality. Taylor spent several minutes in front of her closet, selecting the most unremarkable clothes she owned, items she bought for grocery runs or lazy Sundays that had never seen paparazzi cameras. The winter evening was crisp but not bitterly cold, perfect for walking, and the park's extensive trail system offered plenty of options for staying away from crowded areas. "This is actually working," Taylor said quietly as they entered the park and joined the flow of evening exercisers, joggers with headphones, dog walkers, and couples out for post-holiday strolls. "Look, we're just 2 more people walking in a park. It's amazing what a baseball cap can accomplish," Travis agreed, enjoying the simple pleasure of walking outdoors without constantly scanning for cameras or fans who might want to approach them. "I forgot how good it feels to just exist in public without being on." The park was beautiful in its winter starkness. Loose Park had always been one of Kansas City's gems, with its 165 acres providing a genuine escape from urban life, even in the middle of the city. The trees were bare but elegant against the gray, January sky, and the walking paths were well maintained despite patches of snow from recent weather. "I love how different this feels from our usual walks," Taylor said as they followed a path that wound around the park's central area. "When we're at home, even in our own backyard, I'm always slightly aware that someone might be watching from a distance. But right now, I feel like we could be anyone. We could be that couple," Travis said, nodding toward a pair of walkers ahead of them who were deep in conversation. "Or those people," he added, indicating a family with teenage kids who were grudgingly accompanying their parents on what was clearly a mandatory post-holiday exercise outing. They had been walking for about 30 minutes, genuinely enjoying the experience of being anonymous, when Taylor began to notice more details about their surroundings. The way the light was starting to fade as evening approached, the fact that most other park visitors seemed to be in groups or pairs, the general sense of safety and community that pervaded the well-maintained space. It was this heightened awareness of their environment that made Taylor notice the figure on the bench ahead of them. "Travis," she said quietly, her voice carrying a note of concern that immediately got his attention. "Look at that bench up there." On a bench beside the walking path sat a child who couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old. The boy was alone, hunched over with his arms wrapped around himself for warmth, dressed in what looked like insufficient clothing for the cold evening. Even from a distance, they could see that he was shivering. "That kid looks way too young to be out here by himself," Travis said, his protective instincts immediately activated. "Especially when it's getting dark and this cold. And where are his parents?" Taylor added, scanning the area around the bench for any adults who might be associated with the boy. "I mean, maybe they're just using the restroom or something," but as they got closer, it became clear that the child was genuinely alone. There were no adults anywhere in the vicinity who seemed to be keeping an eye on him, no older siblings or friends nearby, no indication that he was waiting for someone or that his solitude was temporary. "We have to check on him," Taylor said, and Travis could hear in her voice that this wasn't really a question or a suggestion. It was a statement of what they both knew they needed to do. "Absolutely," Travis replied. "If that were my nephew out there, I'd want someone to make sure he was okay." They approached the bench without hesitation, both driven by the same instinct that told them something wasn't right about this situation. As they got closer, they could see that the boy had dark hair and was wearing a jacket that was clearly inadequate for January weather in Kansas City. "Hey there," Travis said gently as they reached the bench, using the calm, non-threatening tone he'd learned from years of interacting with young fans. "Are you okay? You look pretty cold." The boy looked up with startled eyes that immediately showed recognition, despite Travis's baseball cap and casual clothes. His expression shifted from wariness to amazement, then back to wariness, as if he wasn't sure whether seeing famous people in his neighborhood park was a good thing or something that might complicate his already difficult situation. But here's what the boy said next that would completely surprise both Taylor and Travis, and reveal a situation more heartbreaking than they could have imagined. "You're Travis, Kelce," the boy said matter-of-factly, his voice carrying neither excitement nor fear, just a kind of resigned acknowledgement. "My dad watches you play football all the time. He says you're really good when he's not yelling at my mom." The casual way the boy mentioned his father's yelling immediately set off alarm bells for both Taylor and Travis, but they tried to keep their expressions neutral and non-threatening. "I am Travis," Travis confirmed, crouching down to the boy's eye level to make the conversation feel less intimidating. "What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy replied, then looked at Taylor with the same matter-of-fact recognition. "And you're Taylor Swift. My sister Emma loves your music. She has all your albums, even though she has to listen to them with headphones now because mom and dad say your music is too loud when they're trying to fight." Taylor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the January weather at the way Ethan so casually referenced his parents' conflicts as a regular part of his daily life. "Hi, Ethan," Taylor said gently, also crouching down so they were all at the same level. "It's nice to meet you. But can I ask what you're doing out here all by yourself? It's getting pretty cold, and it's almost dark." Ethan's expression immediately closed off, and he looked back down at the ground, clearly recognizing that this question was going to require him to explain things he wasn't sure he wanted to talk about. "I'm fine," he said, though his shivering body contradicted his words. "I'm just sitting here thinking." "Ethan," Travis said carefully, "are your parents around somewhere? Do they know where you are?" For a moment, Ethan didn't respond, and Taylor could see tears beginning to form in his eyes despite his attempts to look tough and self-sufficient. "They don't care where I am," Ethan finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They probably haven't even noticed I'm gone yet. They're too busy screaming at each other to notice anything else." Taylor felt her heart clench at the pain and resignation in this little boy's voice. There was something devastating about the way he spoke about his parents' indifference, as if it were simply a fact of life rather than a source of ongoing hurt. "What do you mean they're screaming at each other?" Taylor asked gently, though she suspected she already knew the answer. They fight all the time now, Ethan replied, wiping his nose with his sleeve. Every single day. They're getting divorced, and they hate each other, and they yell really loud, and sometimes they throw things. I left after lunch today when they started throwing dishes, because last time Mom threw a plate and it broke near where I was sitting. Travis felt a surge of protective anger at the idea of his child being exposed to domestic violence, even if it wasn't directed at him specifically. How long have you been out here, buddy? Travis asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite his growing concern. Since about noon, Ethan said, and Taylor realized with horror that this 9-year-old had been sitting alone in the cold for over 5 hours. I keep thinking they'll realize I'm gone and come looking for me, or at least call me, but they probably don't even remember I exist when they're fighting. Ethan, Taylor said softly, have you eaten anything since lunch? Ethan shook his head. I was supposed to make myself a sandwich, but then the fighting started and They're too busy screaming at each other to notice anything else. Taylor felt her heart clench at the pain and resignation in this little boy's voice. There was something devastating about the way he spoke about his parents' indifference, as if it were simply a fact of life rather than a source of ongoing hurt. What do you mean they're screaming at each other? Taylor asked gently, though she suspected she already knew the answer. They fight all the time now, Ethan replied, wiping his nose with his sleeve. Every single day. They're getting divorced, and they hate each other, and they yell really loud, and sometimes they throw things. I had to leave. I couldn't listen to it anymore. Taylor and Travis exchanged a look over Ethan's head, both of them recognizing that they were dealing with a child who was not only emotionally neglected but potentially physically at risk. Buddy, sitting out here in the cold without food isn't safe, Travis said. You could get really sick, or someone bad could come along. I know, Ethan interrupted, his voice small and defeated. But I don't know where else to go. I can't go home because they're probably still fighting, and I don't have any other family nearby. I thought maybe if I stayed away long enough, they would get worried and stop fighting long enough to come find me. But he trailed off with a shrug that was heartbreaking in its resignation. Taylor felt tears running down her face as she realized that this little boy had been conducting a desperate test to see if his parents would prioritize his safety over their conflict, and he was learning that the answer was no. Ethan, she said, her voice thick with emotion, listen to me, okay? You are not responsible for your parents' problems, and you deserve to feel safe and cared for. The fact that they're having grown-up problems doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. But if I was a better kid, maybe they wouldn't fight so much, Ethan said with the devastating logic that children often use to try to make sense of adult dysfunction. Maybe if I was quieter, or if I didn't need so much stuff, or if I looked more like one of them instead of both of them. Oh, sweetheart, Taylor said, reaching out slowly to place a gentle hand on his shoulder. None of this is your fault. Sometimes adults have problems that have nothing to do with their kids, and unfortunately, sometimes those problems make them forget to take good care of the people they love most. Travis, who had been listening to this conversation with growing determination to help, pulled out his phone. Ethan, we need to make sure you're safe and warm tonight. I'm going to call someone who can help us figure out the best way to do that, okay? Are you going to call the police? Ethan asked, and for the first time since they'd started talking, he looked genuinely frightened. Because if you call the police, they'll just take me home, and then my parents will know I was talking to strangers, and they'll be even more mad than they already are. Travis understood Ethan's fear, but he also knew that a 9-year-old couldn't spend the night outside in January temperatures. Buddy, we have to make sure you're safe, but we're also going to try to make sure that when this gets sorted out, your family gets some help so things can be better for everyone. What do you mean? Ethan asked. I mean there are people whose job it is to help families when they're going through really hard times, Taylor explained. People who can teach your parents better ways to handle their problems so that you don't have to feel scared or invisible. Travis stepped a few feet away and called 911, but when the dispatcher answered, he specifically asked to speak with someone from Child Services who could respond to their location and help assess Ethan's situation in a way that would prioritize his safety and well-being rather than simply returning him to what sounded like an unsafe environment. Sometimes adults have problems that have nothing to do with their kids, and unfortunately, sometimes those problems make them forget to take good care of the people they love most. Travis, who had been listening to this conversation with growing determination to help, pulled out his phone. "Ethan, we need to make sure you're safe and warm tonight." While Travis handled the logistics, Taylor stayed with Ethan, doing her best to keep him warm and engaged in conversation that would help him feel less alone and afraid. "Ethan," she said, "can I ask you what kinds of things you like to do when you're not sitting in cold parks? What makes you happy?" For the first time since they'd met him, Ethan smiled slightly. "I like to read a lot, and I like to build things with Legos. I have this huge castle set that I've been working on for months. And I'm pretty good at math, which is weird because most kids don't like math." "Those are all really cool things," Taylor said encouragingly. "What kind of books do you like to read?" "Adventure books mostly," Ethan replied, warming up slightly to the topic. "Books about kids who go on quests or solve mysteries or save people. I like reading about kids who are brave and who figure out how to fix problems." "You know what?" Taylor said, feeling a surge of admiration for this resilient child. "You're kind of like one of those adventure book kids right now. You saw a dangerous situation at home, you made a smart decision to remove yourself from it, and now you're getting help from some pretty unlikely allies." Ethan considered this perspective, and Taylor could see him trying to reframe his situation as something that demonstrated his strength rather than just his fear and loneliness. "I guess I was pretty brave to stay out here by myself for so long," Ethan said thoughtfully, "even though I was really cold and scared and hungry." "You were incredibly brave," Taylor confirmed. "And smart, too, because you recognized that you didn't feel safe at home and you found a way to protect yourself until you could get help." When the child services worker arrived about 20 minutes later, followed by a police officer who specialized in family crisis situations, Taylor and Travis were able to provide a clear picture of what they had learned about Ethan's home environment and their concerns about his immediate safety. "And I like to build things with Legos. I have this huge castle set that I've been working on for months. And I'm pretty good at math, which is weird because most kids don't like math." "Those are all really cool things," Taylor said encouragingly. "What kind of books do you like to read?" "Adventure books mostly," Ethan replied, warming up slightly to the topic. "Books about kids who go on quests or solve mysteries or save people. I like reading about kids who are brave and who figure out how to fix problems." "You know what?" Taylor said, feeling a surge of admiration for this resilient child. "You're kind of like one of those adventure book kids right now." The child services worker, a woman named Ms. Rodriguez who clearly had extensive experience dealing with children in crisis, spoke with Ethan gently but thoroughly, asking him specific questions about his living situation, his feelings of safety at home, and his relationship with his parents when they weren't fighting. "Ethan," Ms. Rodriguez said after their conversation, "I'm going to contact your parents right now and let them know where you are and that you're safe. But I'm also going to talk with them about getting some immediate help for your family so that everyone can feel safer and happier at home." "Will I have to go home tonight?" Ethan asked nervously. "Because if they're still fighting, we're going to see how your parents respond when I talk to them," Ms. Rodriguez replied honestly. "If I think you'll be safe at home tonight and your parents are ready to make some changes, then yes, you'll go home. But if I'm concerned about your immediate safety, we'll arrange for you to stay somewhere safe tonight while we work on making things better for the long term." As it turned out, when Ms. Rodriguez contacted Ethan's parents, the situation was even worse than they had initially understood. Not only had his parents not realized he was missing, but they were in the middle of such an intense argument that they had trouble focusing on the phone call long enough to understand that their son had been missing for over 6 hours. This complete lack of awareness about their child's absence, combined with what sounded like ongoing domestic conflict in the background of the phone call, convinced Ms. Rodriguez that Ethan needed immediate protection. Rather than returning him to such an unstable environment, she arranged for him to spend the night with an emergency foster family while she initiated a more comprehensive assessment of the home situation. Before Ethan left with Ms. Rodriguez, Taylor and Travis made sure he had their contact information and understood that they wanted to stay in touch to make sure he was doing okay. "Ethan," Taylor said as they prepared to say goodbye, "I want you to remember something really important, okay? What you've been going through, feeling scared and alone and like nobody notices you, that's not because there's anything wrong with you. That's because some adults in your life are having problems that they haven't figured out how to handle properly. And the fact that you were smart enough and brave enough to keep yourself safe until you could get help shows that you're going to be okay," Travis added. "You're a strong kid, Ethan, and now there are going to be people whose job it is to make sure you get the safety and care you deserve." "Will I really see you guys again?" Ethan asked, looking at both of them with hopeful eyes that were no longer quite as sad and resigned as they had been when they first approached the bench. "I think that can definitely be arranged," Taylor replied with a warm smile. "Maybe when things get settled with your family, we can all meet up. Somewhere fun, somewhere with heat and food, and maybe some of those Lego sets you like." As they watched Ms. Rodriguez's car disappear into the evening traffic with Ethan safely secured in the back seat, Taylor and Travis both stood in the park for several minutes, processing the weight of what had just happened and the randomness of the encounter that had changed the course of his child's life. "I keep thinking about the timing," Taylor said as they finally began walking back toward their own car. "If we had decided to stay home tonight, or if we had chosen a different route through the park, or if we had walked just 15 minutes earlier or later." "But we didn't," Travis replied, wrapping his arm around her as they walked. "We were exactly where we needed to be when someone needed help." Before Ethan left with Ms. Rodriguez, Taylor and Travis made sure he had their contact information and understood that they wanted to stay in touch to make sure he was doing okay. "Ethan," Taylor said as they prepared to say goodbye, "I want you to remember something really important, okay? What you've been going through, feeling scared and alone and like nobody notices you, that's not because there's anything wrong with you. That can't be a coincidence. It makes me think about how many other kids might be out there," Taylor said, her voice thoughtful and slightly haunted by what they had witnessed. "Kids who are sitting alone somewhere, hoping someone will notice they need help, but not having anyone walk by who's willing to get involved." As they reached their car and began the drive home, both Taylor and Travis were quiet for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts about Ethan and the broader implications of what his situation revealed about children at risk. "You know what really gets to me?" Travis finally said as they stopped at a traffic light near their neighborhood. "The fact that he had been testing whether his parents would notice he was gone and they didn't." Before Ethan left with Ms. Rodriguez, Taylor and Travis made sure he had their contact information and understood that they wanted to stay in touch to make sure he was doing okay. "Ethan," Taylor said as they prepared to say goodbye, "I want you to remember something really important, okay? What you've been going through, feeling scared and alone and like nobody notices you, that's not because there's anything wrong with you. That's the kind of thing that could break a kid's spirit permanently if it goes on too long." "But maybe it won't go on too long," Taylor replied, though her voice carried the uncertainty that comes from understanding that good intentions and immediate interventions don't always lead to happy endings. "Maybe Ms. Rodriguez will be able to help his family figure out how to do better. Maybe his parents will realize that they almost lost something precious because they were so focused on their anger at each other." "I hope so," Travis said. "But even if they don't, at least now there are other adults who know about Ethan and who are committed to making sure he's safe. That's something." As they pulled into their driveway and prepared to return to the warmth and safety of their own home, both Taylor and Travis felt profoundly changed by their encounter with Ethan. What had started as a simple desire for an anonymous walk had become a stark reminder of how many children live with uncertainty, fear, and emotional neglect, and how important it is for adults to be willing to notice and respond when someone needs help. "I think we should look into supporting organizations that work with families going through divorce," Taylor said as they sat in the car for a moment before going inside. "Specifically programs that focus on protecting children's emotional well-being during family breakups." "That's a really good idea," Travis agreed. "And maybe programs that teach conflict resolution and co-parenting skills so fewer kids end up feeling like they're invisible in their own homes." As they finally went inside, both Taylor and Travis carried with them not only the memory of Ethan's brave face and resilient spirit, but also a renewed sense of responsibility to use their platform and resources to support children who find themselves in situations where the adults who should be protecting them are too overwhelmed by their own problems to provide adequate care. "That's the kind of thing that could break a kid's spirit permanently if it goes on too long." "But maybe it won't go on too long," Taylor replied, though her voice carried the uncertainty that comes from understanding that good intentions and immediate interventions don't always lead to happy endings. Maybe Ms. Rodriguez will be able to help his family figure out how to do better. Maybe his parents will realize that they almost lost something precious because they were so focused on their anger at each other. I hope so, Travis said. But even if they don't, at least now there are other adults who know about Ethan and who are committed to making sure he's safe. The evening had been nothing like what they had planned when they put on their baseball caps and headed out for a normal walk, but it had been exactly what it needed to be. A reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply pay attention to the world around you and be willing to act when someone needs help, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's not your problem, and even when you're not sure what the outcome will be. What do you think about this powerful story of how a simple walk became a life-changing encounter, which happened yesterday evening? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you could help someone who really needed it? Share your stories about unexpected moments of connection and care in the comments below, because sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply notice when someone needs help and be willing to provide it. The most beautiful part of this story isn't that Taylor and Travis were famous people who happened to help a child, though their intervention was certainly crucial. It's the reminder that children who are struggling often need adults who will simply see them, listen to them, and take their feelings seriously, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is our attention and our commitment to making sure they're okay. If this story inspired you to think about the children in your community who might need support, or about how we can all be more aware of people who might be struggling, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about people who understand that taking care of each other is one of our most important responsibilities. Because sometimes the most meaningful encounters happen when we're just trying to live normal lives, and sometimes the greatest adventures are the ones where we help someone else feel safer and more cared for in the world.